damage, and so on. But the latest information that we have is that provinces have done their best in terms of making sure that right from the first day of reopening, they work on these schools to make sure that when learners arrive, at least schooling will continue. In instances where schools are not accessible, provinces have been advised, we've been working with them to find alternative facilities so that learners do not stay without, receiving education. We're also looking at, how many principals were able to arrive, how many teachers arrived on the 1st, principals on the 25th of Jan, and we're providing those figures there. We also look at health and safety. What is important here is orientation. The good thing is that we've got some lessons from 2020. We're not coming cold, we're not blank on this environment, so those lessons will come in handy in helping us to start the 2020 academic year. And as we know, school principals started on the 25th, teachers came on the 1st. We've also been finding out what exactly have they been doing from the first day when they arrived in their individual schools. That information is also well documented. The issue of COVID essentials, are they adequate? The other issue is to manage the stock of COVID essentials so that schools do not run out of COVID essentials. I must say that in this difficult fiscal environment, we know that the economy has not been growing. The pandemic just exacerbated the fiscal situation. Money is not readily available to deal with all of these things. We had to actually take money allocated for infrastructure to procure COVID essentials. We're also going to continue with 5 models of timetables that schools are advised to consider. We'll continue with alternating days, alternating weeks. Platooning, although is discouraged by many schools and many districts and provinces, it's one of the 5 models that are available. We're also sharing some details around the information that the minister shared. We've been hard hit by the pandemic, particularly starting from the month of November, culminating to December, right in the middle of the storm of the second wave up to January. We've lost some of our educators and some of our very experienced and competent officials, and they will remain martyrs of the basic education sector as we move forward. So we're sharing the data around fatalities. We can see that the numbers that the minister referred to as indicated there. We're sharing on educators, on learners, which is the smallest, which is 19, lower than even the international benchmark, and the non-teaching staff. School admissions, as the minister said, we really want to applaud provinces. We've drastically reduced the backlog of placements. We can see that, we've admitted for grade 1, 717,433. For grade 8, we've placed or admitted 733,149. You can see that we still have a few that have not been placed. For grade 8 is 16,000. For grade 1, which is drastically low compared to previous years, it's about 8,000, and would be looking for placing all of them in a week or two. Some of the reasons that account to late placement, some of our parents are not getting used to apply a year in advance, but we also understand that in some schools, spaces are in high demand, and it's not possible for all schools to accommodate all the admissions that come at their doorstep. But I must applaud provinces for having reduced this number of learners who are not placed. Dropout rate is another area of concern. So the Back to School campaign, driven by the QLTC, working with our social partners, they are driving that area. Teacher provisioning, all schools have received their school post-establishment And that is actually finalized around the month of September, October. And we can confirm that all the 9 provinces have afforded all our schools posts that they require. Where there are changes beginning of schooling, schools and provinces and districts know what to do. Teachers with comorbidities, provinces have made arrangements as well, which place a huge financial demand on provinces. But so far, we've been able to battle with this and cope with it. We'll be meeting with teacher unions because the resolution that existed expired when we moved to alert level 1. So we have a circular that regulates the current dispensation as an interim measure. We're looking at meeting at the ELRC to look at whether we will come up with a resolution to take us forward. LTSM, most provinces use the just-on-time principle to deliver because you know that many of our schools are vandalized, and some of these items are items that are taken away when people break into our schools and even take food items and so on. So they've taken just on time, delivering when principals arrived because learners would arrive on the 15th. So stationery has been delivered. Some textbooks are to be finalized, but many of them have now been delivered. And this is just top up. We're not providing textbooks afresh to every learner. We're just dealing with shortages in the system. The ICT rollout, we came up with a comprehensive ICT rollout plan, particularly driving broadcasting solutions to provide support to learners at school and at home, and this has proven to be working in 2020, so we'll continue with that in 2021. National School Nutrition Program, just to share some data of even learners we've been receiving feeding ever since principals and school management teams arrived on the 25th. We're sharing that data. And of course, more and more learners will benefit from this as they start schooling tomorrow. Infrastructure, we've also referred to storm damaged schools. We're providing data there of storm damaged schools and what provinces are doing to deal with storm damaged schools. And the next one is a provision of mobile classrooms where they are needed in terms of the numbers, and some classrooms which cannot be utilized because they are damaged. Water, in terms of water, the 6 o'clock meetings have started again with the infrastructure line function to make sure that attention is given to sanitation and water, and that has been going on well. Provinces together with DBE are working together to address instances where there's water shortages. The information that we have is that there should be no school without water. There should be some form of either tankering in providing water or working with municipalities to increase water pressure because those are some of the challenges. Learner transport, our provision for learner transport, we provide 80 to 85% of learners who are in need, given the financial resources that are available. And we are giving figures. You can see that the supply and demand, the gap has been narrowed over time. It has been drastically narrowed there. School vandalism, we're giving figures there. 1,724 of our schools got vandalized over the festive season. More often than not, when schools are closed, then the rate of vandalism goes up. Hostel facilities, they've been audited as well, whether they'll be able to comply with physical and social distancing. We're giving you the figures there, those who comply, those who don't comply, alternative measures are being employed. Learners or schools for learners with special education needs, we've also been auditing provision such as assistive devices, therapeutic services. The long closure of schools impact on these learners profoundly. Many of them don't get to access these services, and that slows their development and their well-being. And we're happy that they are coming back and will be able to get all these services back. And as I've said, we are meeting regularly with Association of School Governing Bodies, professional bodies, which includes professional bodies that represent schools for learners with special education needs. Psychosocial services, which is the last one, program director. It's a major area for us. The demand has been huge for SMT members, for teachers. The demand is going to be even higher for learners as learners return, having been traumatized by the fact that they would have lost a loved one, they would have also been infected and so on, they would have lost a teacher. So we're working with NGOs. We've also brought in online services that will come in handy to provide for this. We're also working with faith-based organizations because they are very good in this area. So we're going to keep monitoring this and make sure that the necessary support is provided. Thank you very much for indulging me.
Thanks so much, DJ. You forgot your mask here, but I know you have sufficient supply to take you through the day. Thank you for that presentation. We are now going to cross over to Cape Town, where we're going to find Hugh Amor, who the minister has already referred to, is the chairperson of the NITT, which is the National Investigations Task Team. There's NEIC and then there's NITT. So these acronyms are quite interesting. All right, let's go through to him. Let me see if he's available on the screen. Good afternoon, Hugh. If you can hear me, please respond so we can proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Elijah. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great stuff. We also have Advocate Luvuyo Bono, who is going to start. He will make a few remarks and then hand over to you. The advocate is the chairperson of the NEIC, the National Examinations Irregularities Committee, and he's going to make a few remarks, and thereafter the presentation will come from you. So Advocate Bono is in PE, and Hugh is in Cape Town. So from Pretoria, I hand over to PE. Advocate, please unmute.
Thank you, Mr. Mhlanga. And good afternoon to the Minister, the Deputy Minister, the DG, and members of the media. As the South African public is quite aware that there were some leaks on the matric exams that took place, and as the National Irregularities Committee, we then subjected the matter to an investigation led by Hugh, the NITT, and Hugh will give you a detailed report on what came out, but from just in brief from the investigation, which looked at, amongst other things, investigative marking, verification, as well as a statistical analysis of the marks. The report which you are going to be taken through was brought to us as the NEIC, and we looked at it, and we looked at the findings, particularly around the fact that what appeared from the investigation was that the candidates had in fact shown that they had done the work individually, and that there was no evidence of collusion, and that the leaks had really came out or spread through a WhatsApp message. And based on the evidence that had been collected through the investigation, a recommendation on the basis that the 2020 combined exams were not compromised, which we accepted and we are happy with, and presented to the department at large, both at HEDCOM and CM level, to support the fact that we are quite happy with the report and the outcome thereof. But as I have indicated, Hugh Amor, who was the head of the investigation, will then take you through the report in detail, and I'm sure you'll be given an opportunity to ask questions. Thank you, Mr. Mhlanga. Mr. Amor, over to you.
Thank you. Elijah, are you going to flag the presentation?
Yes, I will. Trying to get the presentation as we speak.
While he's doing that, Minister, Deputy Minister, DG, and members of the media, the purpose of this briefing is to present the conclusions of the task team. And those conclusions, in brief, are that given that the spread of the leaked questions was done via WhatsApp, it is a fact that the full extent of the leaks may never be revealed. But based on the available evidence we have at the moment, from the investigative marking, from interviews, and the statistical analysis, widespread leaks did not occur. Elijah, would you like me to try?
Yes, we can proceed. We are projecting the presentation. I hope you can see it.
I can't see it, but if you tell me which slide we're on.
We are on purpose.
Okay. The purpose I've just explained, and I want to go on from there to the introduction. And the point that I think needs to be made here is that the National Senior Certificate is a flagship qualification. It's critical at the exit from schooling at grade 12, and therefore it's critical that its integrity and credibility is maintained. And I think we need to make the point that despite the very successful administration of the combined 2020 examinations for the NSC and the Senior Certificate amended, and I think it's worth just pausing to note that that took place for over 1 million candidates for the first time, because the June candidates were added to the November candidates. And it took place, as I don't need to remind anybody, in the context of COVID. So we had a very successful administration of the exams, but it needs to be accepted that the examination was marred by the leaks of Mathematics Paper 2 and Physical Sciences Paper 2 question papers. What I want to try to show is that our investigation, which was to establish the extent of the leaks, to determine the source of the security breach or breaches, to identify those individual candidates who had prior access to a leaked question paper or papers, to make recommendations on the credibility of the examination in the country as a whole, and to work with the provincial examination irregularities committees. We have PEICs as well as the NEIC, to work with the PEICs in all provinces to ensure that investigations and hearings are conducted with regard to individual learners against whom there is an allegation of wrongdoing, and at the same time to ensure that there's no duplication in the responsibilities relating to this investigation and the state security agencies. And then it was critical for our task team to make recommendations so in order to we adopt statistical analysis of the raw marks, interviews with candidates, and to investigation agents, two investigations conducted by third-party organizations. First, a private investigator to look at some IT forensic investigation on behalf of the task team, and secondly, the investigation to establish the source, first of all by audit by the DBE staff, and secondly by the Directorate for Priority Crimes Investigations, often referred to popularly as the Hawks. Now, what leaked and what was done? And I think that this is the beginning of what one needs to understand about this process. Well, the first reports on a suspect led to two sources of information. First of all, from a printer contracted by one province who has been arrested, who has appeared in court, and who has been remanded for further hearing in March. But he had in his possession question papers, including the second mathematics paper, in other words, paper 2 for mathematics. These reports that this person had leaked papers in his possession were too late for the DBE to replace mathematics paper 2, but in time for the DBE to replace other key subject question papers under strict security. What that meant was that the original question papers, already printed and distributed to the centres, were replaced at short notice, replaced under conditions of very strict security, eliminating any possible leak which might have been in the distribution chain, and then sent to examination centres. This was an important and effective first mitigation action taken by the department. Establishing the source was obviously the first critical task, and remains the first critical task. And what did it involve? As I said, it involved an audit of the distribution chain. It involves investigation by the DPCI. It involved interviews with candidates and the appointment of a forensic private investigator. Now, as I indicated at the outset, the mode of transmission, which was by social media, was by WhatsApp, makes precise determination of the spread virtually impossible. And a forensic investigator and DPCI processes that have not yet been completed. That, though, does not prevent us from reaching the conclusions which we've come to. So what findings did we make? Well, first of all, two findings about the leaks. A leak did occur from one province's contract printers. We know, and it's a matter of public record, that the suspect has been arrested and has appeared in court. The second leak, which we have established, is a paper printed at the Government Printing Works leaked. Now, the Government Printing Works prints for two provinces. The investigation into this leak is in the hands of the DPCI, but we know from a candidate who reported having received a leaked paper that the leaked paper was from one of the Government Printing Works printed papers. So that leak is now being pursued to conclusion by the DPCI. For our present purposes, not for the future, but for our present purposes, what's more important is to find out what happened as a result of those two leaks. What had to be done as well was to check the distribution chain. And here, an intensive audit was undertaken by the Department of Basic Education relating to the distribution from points of print to exam centres for the mathematics paper 2 and the physical sciences paper 2. And the intention of this intensive audit was to identify any possible breach in the distribution chain that may have contributed to the leak. This was extensive, and it is a matter of great comfort to the team that the DBE audit team found no indications of any breaches during the storage and distribution of these two question papers. So what do we know about the extent of the leaks? Well, first of all, we have evidence from a number of chat groups where we are able to determine the number of learners in each chat group. The first chat group A had 135 learners. And in this case, we know, because we have interviewed the person who sent material to this chat group, that what was sent to this chat group was 2 sub-questions worth 5 marks each. Because he had received the paper, he was unable to answer those 2 sub-questions, though he could do the rest, and he sent to his chat group those 2 questions asking for help in solving those problems. This was after 10 p.m. on Sunday the 15th of November for an exam that was to be written first thing on the Sunday morning, on the Monday morning. So late on Sunday night, he was unable to answer these 2 sub-questions and sent these 2 sub-questions to the other 134 members of his chat group. We have established in respect of other chat groups to whom a full paper or questions from a full paper were leaked, that 101 learners were in those chat groups. That then is a total of 236 candidates for the 2020 NSC to whom mathematics questions or mathematics question papers were sent by way of WhatsApp group. In respect of physical sciences, the numbers are smaller, and the chat groups here total 62 learners. So what do we know about these learners who have had this access? Now, as I've said, there are 236 in mathematics and 62 in physical sciences who were sent screenshots of questions or question papers prior to the writing of paper 2 exams in these subjects. This available evidence is not, and of course cannot be conclusive to the extent of the leak. We can't claim that we have uncovered every single WhatsApp group, though there is further evidence that suggests that we may well have done so. So on this evidence, the leaks were limited to very small numbers. The next step in the investigation was to conduct investigative marking, and this was done countrywide. Investigative marking aims to determine any unusual patterns and particularly to establish whether there's been any collusion at a particular centre in respect of a particular question or a question papers. And for mathematics, where the more intensive investigative marking took place, this involved 116 exam centres and 5,612 candidates. In respect to physical sciences, it involved 17 centres and 473. Now, the findings of this investigative marking, most scripts showed investigative mark. The scores of the WhatsApp group, and I should have mentioned beforehand that that WhatsApp group of 135 learners to whom the 1 learner sent 2 sub-questions is a talent group identified for particular special coaching because they are high achievers. The scores of the WhatsApp group were high, as expected, and we know that these learners had access. By access, I mean they were sent screenshots of 2 paper 2 questions, question 6.2 and 6.4. We do, of course, and we have looked at what having been sent the screenshots meant. And the evidence is very clear that on the claims of the candidates, and they have been interviewed, on the claims of the candidates, very few of those 134 had opened the WhatsApp message before the exam. And that is understandable. This was sent late on the Sunday night for an exam first thing on the Monday morning. And while some people may be addicted to their cell phones, not all learners are. And what was important, there was no evidence found through this investigative marking of collusion amongst the candidates. This was subject to verification. This investigative marking was subject to verification by a team from the DBE of people belonging to specific groups, and the headlines from that verification are clear that no evidence was found to suggest that these candidates benefited from prior access, if they had it, to the question paper or sub-questions. The suspect candidates, and what I mean by suspect candidates is those candidates to whom the screenshot was sent. We know that they were sent, and in many cases, the candidates concerned claim that they had not opened that post before, and in some cases there is cell phone evidence to prove that. There were specific candidates who presented evidence of performance in the whole of the investigative marking group that need further investigation, but this was not group related, and that investigation is taking place independently because it's not linked to the leaks of these papers. The next important task was to subject the results to statistical analysis. And the purpose of this was to determine whether there was any pattern that indicated unusual performance in Maths Paper 2 or in Physical Sciences Paper 2. Given that the leaks related to these two question papers, we were confident that if there had been widespread leaks, it would be apparent through a process of statistical analysis. And what we did in order to try to give us confidence on this, and particularly to confidence in respect of any pattern that we might or might not observe, is that this statistical analysis was done on the results not just of 2020, but on the results of the 4 preceding years, 2016 to 2019. And simply to give you an indication of what the cohort sizes were, and the statistical analysis was confined to the full-time candidates in each of these subjects. You'll see from the chart that the 2020 numbers, though smaller than the highest number in 2016, in both mathematics and in physical science, are of the same order of magnitude. 232,000 full-time candidates for mathematics, compared to a high of 265 in 2016 and a low of 221,000 in 2019. And similarly, in physical science, the number of 173,000 in 2020 was lower than the high of 193,000 in 2015, but higher than the low of 164,000 in 2019. So what did we do in relation to the statistical analysis? The purpose was to try to determine whether there was an unusual pattern in relation to paper 2 results. So what we did is we took the paper 1 and paper 2 raw marks of full-time candidates. We took the difference, in other words, the mark obtained in paper 2 less the mark in paper 1, and that was computed for each candidate for the years 2016 to 2020. And distribution curves of the differences were plotted on the same axes for 2016 to 2020 to see how the different years compared against each other. And what was done here in order to try to establish a statistical pattern was to take a simple linear regression using paper 2 marks less paper 1 marks, computing the standardized residual for each candidate. In other words, the standardized residual from the expected mark from paper 2 given the performance in paper 1, plot that standardized residual against the candidate's paper 1 marks. And this would highlight any candidates who performed poorly in the paper 1 mark, but who achieved an unusually high mark in the paper 2 examination. And we identified all candidates whose standardized residuals were greater than 3 in order that we would look at those that were statistically relevant. I'm going to show next a number of diagrams which show the pattern observed in the 4 years 2016 to 2019 and the pattern observed in 2020, first of all in mathematics and then in physical sciences. So these are the patterns for the 4 years 2016 to 2019. These are the patterns of the distribution, and it will be clear from these patterns that the pattern in the years 2016 to 2019 were very similar in all respects, and you'll see a very similar pattern. So we then needed to look at what the pattern was in 2020 to see if it was significantly different. This then is the pattern in 2020. And as you will see, this shows a very similar pattern, but there is a scattering, not of large numbers, but there is a scattering above value 3 and into the 4 statistical residual number in the 2020 group that is not as obvious in the 4 years. The next slide will show this in more detail and in a way that may be easier to comprehend. Each dot on these represents a candidate in the examination. And you'll see that in each of the 4 years, 2016 to 2019, there were candidates who outperformed against their expectations in paper 2 relative to paper 1. Now, there are many reasons for that, and there may be questions in paper 2 that are easier for some candidates than for others than their paper 1, and it may also be that in some schools the attention given to paper 2 questions is more focused than the attention given to paper 1 questions. But you will see from this that there are more dots in the Mathematics 2020 area, and that's visually important, visually clear. But let's just look at the next slide, which actually gives us the numbers. The number in 2020 is an outlier. It's 205 against the highest previous number of 66 and a low in 2018 of 27. So what we see is that there is a pattern here. It is a pattern of outperformance of 205 that is not observed to that extent in the patterns of the previous 4 years. The next slide that we wanted to look at was what happened to the 175 full-time candidates in mathematics. Of that 236, the 175 who were sent a question or question paper, what was their performance? Were they in the outlier group or were they not? And on this chart, each black dot represents a candidate to whom a question or question paper was sent prior to the examination. And this shows their paper 2 outperformance in relation to their paper 1 outperformance. What is very clear from this graph is that most of the black dots are where one would expect them. They're around the value, but there are only two in the 205 that have a standardized residual of greater than 3. So it would appear from this that to the extent that those 175 learners of the 236 to whom this paper was sent, who are full-time candidates who are doing mathematics, that the actual outperformance is only observed in respect of 2 candidates. For the rest, they performed as they would have been expected to perform given the paper 1 results. So when we compare the annual standardized results, the trend is very much the same, except, of course, as you will have seen in the case of 2020, where there is a higher concentration of outliers beyond a value of 3 and higher. But when I say it's a higher concentration of outliers, that higher concentration is limited to 205 out of 232,000 candidates. As I've said, the black points in that graph represent the 175 full-time candidates who are alleged to have been sent the question paper or parts of the question paper. For shorthand, we've referred to those as the suspects in this report. And the overlap is only 2 candidates. What's also important is to look at the mean standardized residual for this 175, and the mean standardized residual for this group is minus 0.1, a small negative number. What this means is that suspects obtained paper 2 marks which were very slightly lower than what might have expected from their paper 1 marks. And this value is so close to zero that one can infer that the 175 suspects, and again I qualify the term suspects, performed as well as one might have expected, whether they had or did not have prior access to the leaked papers. We then look at the same patterns for physical sciences, and I'll go through these briefly, but here are the 4 years 2016 to 2019, and again it will be observed that the patterns are similar in each of the 4 years. There's no unexpected difference in each of those 4 years when compares the paper 2 and paper 1 performance of candidates in those years. What then was the case in 2020? This is the case in 2020, and in fact this is so similar to those of the previous 4 years as almost to be negligible. And the next graph shows the numbers, again remembering that each dot represents a candidate who have outperformed in paper 2 relative to her or his performance in paper 1. And you'll see that the numbers in 2020 are significantly lower than some of the previous years. What those figures actually are is quite interesting, because in 2020 we have the smallest number of outliers in respect of the 5 years concerned. There was a high point in 2019, and the number in 2020 is only 59. That indicates that there is no concentration of outlier performers in respect of physical science, and does suggest that to the extent that there was a leak in the physical science paper 2, the impact is not visible from the statistical analysis. Of course, the statistical analysis on its own does not prove anything, but taken together with the other elements of our investigation is, I think, important. So the summary of the statistical analysis then: no evidence has been found of an unusual pattern. There is evidence that only 2 of the 175 suspect learners were in the upper standards residual for mathematics, category 3 and above. But there were another 203 in that outlier group. And further statistical analysis has shown clustering of the 205 with a standardized residual greater than 3 in a small number of schools in one geographical area. These schools in which there is this clustering had a mean school standardized residual of greater than 1. That attracts attention and means that we need to give further attention to it. So I'll come quickly to our conclusions and recommendations. And the headline conclusions and recommendations: given that the spread of the leaked questions was done via WhatsApp, the full extent of the leaks may not be uncovered. Any member of any group might have forwarded what she or he had seen to other people. That's possible. But on the evidence available at the moment from investigative marking and the statistical analysis and the interviews, widespread leaks do not seem to have occurred. And what we can say with confidence is that there's been no compromise to the integrity of the 2020 combined examination as a whole. And while the integrity of the mathematics paper 2 and physical sciences paper 2 has been marred, that was the statement I made earlier on, it has not been compromised overall. What does this lead to? Well, as I've said, neither investigative marking nor the statistical analysis on their own would be conclusive. But taken together and added to what we have to date from cell phone records and interviews, the absence of unusual patterns suggests strongly that widespread leaks did not occur. So we concluded that though 2 serious leaks occurred, the damage was limited to a very small number of learners in 2 papers in mathematics paper 2. What do we recommend about that? Well, first of all, we are clear that one of the key things for the future, not for the present, one of the key things for the future is that it is of the utmost importance that the case against the person accused of stealing papers from the one province's contracting printers office, that process be pursued to conclusion. And secondly, that the investigation into the leak related to the government printing works be finalised and the process be pursued to conclusion. It's only when that is done that we will be able to say what was the modus operandi, first of all, of the theft, and secondly, what was the modus operandi of the spreading from the theft to candidates. So that's an important one. Then we have made recommendations in respect of all the implicated candidates and how they should be managed. Now, there are 5 categories of what we refer to as implicated candidates. First of all, there are the candidates who are a recipient, and often probably an unwitting recipient, of the WhatsApp message concerned. And as I said earlier, some of these did, and some of these may have opened those WhatsApp messages prior to the exam writing, but certainly some of them, and we don't know whether that's the majority, but it may well be the majority, did not do so. There are 236 such candidates. So these are unwitting recipients, and this group A excludes those in those WhatsApp groups whom we know to have been spreaders. In other words, people who sent the questions to the WhatsApp group, or having received them, sent them on to others knowing that they were exam questions. They're excluded from group A. Secondly, there are the candidates where the statistical evidence suggests that performance in paper 2 relative to paper 1 makes him or her an outlier. And there are 205 such candidates, 2 of whom are in group A, so they're excluded. Thirdly, then there are where a candidate is implicated in that he or she was sent a question paper by the WhatsApp group, and the statistical evidence suggests that performance in paper 2 relative makes him or her an outlier. Then group D is where there is further evidence. In other words, where we know that the candidate was an initiator or spreader, or in some other way we have evidence of alleged wrongdoing on her or his part. And then the 5th group is that group of schools clustered in one particular geographical area where the standardized residual for paper 2 mathematics is unusually high for a school. In other words, where the mean standardized residual for the school as a whole is greater than 1, we think that that's a group worthy of identification. It was our job via the NEIC to make recommendations about these groups, and our recommendations in respect of these groups was that only in categories C and D, the results will be blocked pending further investigation. Our recommendation in respect of categories A and B, the results will be released pending further investigation, and in category E, the results will be released pending school investigation. And it's important to note in this respect that should further investigation reveal that a candidate was in fact guilty of some wrongdoing, the Gen-FEDCO Act, which is the piece of legislation that governs Umalusi, the Gen-FEDCO Act provides that the council, that is the Council of Umalusi, may refuse to issue a certificate if a substantial irregularity has occurred in relation to any external assessment. It may cancel a certificate, and it may require an issued certificate to be returned. And of course, the process at this stage is that when results are released by the Minister, candidates will get a statement of results. It will be later that a certificate is issued. So at this stage, the statement of results, which is not a certification document, is sent to candidates. So the certificates are issued later, but it's in this regard that the council may refuse to issue that certificate, or if it's already done so, that it may cancel it. We hope that the investigation will be complete in respect of all these groups prior to the actual issue of certificates by Umalusi. Then, of course, recommendation relating to system security. During the inspection of the government printing works, it was evident that the processes currently in use are susceptible to security breaches. And we recommend that an audit of these processes and protocols should be undertaken, and where necessary, changes be made to the protocols governing this printing. That is a recommendation for the future. And in parallel, once we have conclusion of the two cases which we know are underway, we hope to be able to establish modus operandi in both cases, and at that stage we will be able to look at that and to take such remedial action as may be necessary. That brings me, Minister, to my last slide, which is to say the full report of the NITT with our recommendations. These were presented to Umalusi on Friday, the 12th of February. Umalusi will make its decision and will host, I understand, their official media briefing on the integrity of these public examinations tomorrow, Monday, the 15th of February. And of course, we now await the Umalusi announcement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amor, for that detailed presentation. We really appreciate it. And we are glad that your network was able to stand for the entire duration of the presentation. Thank you so much to also Advocate Bono, who is part of this process. And we really appreciate the work that has been done. Colleagues, I'm now going to allow for questions to be asked. I know some of them might have already come through on the WhatsApp line. I'm going to ask colleagues on the WhatsApp line. In fact, let's start there so that we get through those questions. I did indicate earlier that there was a lot to get through this afternoon, and I'm sure the colleagues might have seen already that we've gone through like quite a bit of information. So the questions might just be as many. But TK, let me come to you in terms of the questions on the WhatsApp line. Takelan.
Thanks, Mr. Mhlanga, and good afternoon to everyone. Our first question is coming from Geoff Hill from the Washington Times. Said, Minister, you mentioned the problem of learner dropout, and at the end of 2020, there were instances of orphans and children whose IDs had been lost within the Home Affairs system, allegedly being denied a chance to write matric at state schools. And he said, I have personally investigated one of these allegations. Could you please let us know what the official policy of government is on this matter? And we have Thais Kiva from the Platinum Northwest TV and Brothers Times, and the question is, what is the plan for the Department of Basic Education regarding schools that are and will be affected by floods and heavy rains, especially in the rural provinces like the Northwest? And Mr. Mhlanga, we have a couple of questions here from Matlaku Komane from the SABC News. And I think there are 5 questions, which are the last from what I have.
Let's go through them.
Yes, and the first one from Matlaku is, what is the plan for the placement of these 25,099 grade 1 and 8 learners? Have the provinces given commitments in terms of dates when all learners will be placed? And number 2, also Limpopo and Western Cape have the bigger number in terms of unplaced learners. What are the challenges in these provinces according to what they are telling you? Number 3, Limpopo and KZN account for the majority of the deceased educators. How will these provinces fill these vacancies, considering that it is challenging to attract educators to the rural provinces? And number 4, according to the presentation, 2 Northwest schools don't have water. When will this be resolved? And the last question from Matlaku, which will also be last overall from my side. 18 schools in Mpumalanga and 42 schools in Limpopo failed to open due to storm challenges. What will happen to learners in those schools on Monday? Thanks.
All right, great stuff. Thank you for those questions. I'm not sure if there's any questions in the room. I'm seeing 2 hands, not more. That's good. It means that there's not a lot of people in the room, so we are adhering to the regulations. Please introduce yourself and then get through to your question.
Tsakoma Afi from ENCA. I just want to find out the dropout rate. What are we currently sitting on in that regard? And the vandalized schools, how many of those have been fixed, including the ones that Mahlaku has now mentioned that were damaged by the storms in various provinces? Thank you.
Thank you.
Zipona Chana from Museum Africa. Just clarity on the attendance of learners. Will it be a full going back? There will be no designated days. Can the Minister please explain that? And lastly, just Minister, it's a day before the schools start. Why was this briefing so late?
Okay. I'm going to ask the Minister to go first.
Can you answer for me?
Yeah, Minister. There are protocols. There's that camera there that we must look at. Hope, please assist.
No, thank you very much for the questions. And some of the answers are contained in the presentation, which I had promised that we will put on our website because it has all the figures. But I'll ask UDG to just give you the specific figures on what are the dropout rates. But as we said, last year we had rotational, we had all sorts of school attendance systems, and we're estimating, because we were just working on the basis of school calendars or just managing through attendance registered. But DG will give you what our estimation is. On learners that, Dr. Polio, that learners will not be allowed to write because they don't have IDs. I would want to see, because we even have learners that even, let alone that they get banned or other things, we allow them to write and then they'll have to present the certificate. So it will be interesting or helpful to really get where these learners are, because policy doesn't say we have to turn back learners who can write, but I'll ask Dr. Polio to explain, but I'll be interested too to know where did that happen. On schools, again, in the presentation, the full presentation, which I say we'll put on our website, we already have received statistics from provinces where they've been affected by roads, which schools are affected, which schools are storm damaged. But what provinces are doing from their maintenance budgets, it's to repair those schools in between. Partly, the 2 weeks has helped us also because we would have been caught in the middle of those rains during, if we had opened end of January. So the 2 weeks has, in a way, helped us to buy time, and provinces are busy. Again, we'll give you the figures to say how many provinces are mostly affected. It's still in the presentation. In terms of filling of posts, according to our reports, all posts have been filled. It may be difficult to attract people in rural areas, but we are in a very fortunate situation where we have an oversupply of young people who are looking for posts in the education sector. So we still have also a number of learners that we had given bursaries through Funza Lushaka that we've not been able to place because there are no posts. So the reports that we got is that all schools have received their post provisioning. And as I say, we have reached a stage in the sector where we don't have a crisis in terms of teacher supply for now, so we don't have that problem. On what we're going to do, the number of schools and the Where we had the highest number, it's in Northern Cape, where we have 42 schools that were still, or is it Northwest? It's in Mpumalanga. Yeah, it's 43 where we had the highest number of schools that have been damaged. Again, the provinces from their reports, DG will respond. They're using different methods. If there's a neighboring schools, is to find space. If they can bring mobiles. Again, they're using different modalities to deal with it. But we'll give you the exact numbers to say in Mpumalanga how many schools have been how many schools have been affected. Yeah, so the dropout rates will give you the estimates, the damage. Yeah, so I'm not sure which one. There's the one I said will be returning and Sweden. Or in terms of whether when learners come, are they all coming on the same day? No. They will come back the way we did in 2020 because we still have to do social distancing. They will come on certain days. And again, the 2 weeks bought us time so that we are able to re-timetable, orientate the new grades. So the other grades which were at school will come back the way they left. So if they were on a platooning system, they'll come as platooning. If they were on a rotational system, they'll come under the rotational system. If they were on a weekly system, they'll come on a weekly system. Again, the report, as I say, it speaks about 42 pages, the slides. And we'll request that, Mhlang, we put them on our website. Then you can get all the statistics which we couldn't run through today because of time. But if you can just say about dropouts and, yeah, some of the specific. Okay. Because I don't have the full report here.
Oh, thank you very much, Minister, and thank you, colleagues from the media, for your comments and questions.
Did you don't forget to, I forgot this other one, but why are we reporting so late?
Okay, no, thank you, Minister. Maybe to say that we had a similar briefing towards the end of the year on the state of readiness, Minister. This is a follow-up to that briefing, but we also do briefings just the day before. But remember that schools didn't reopen are not going to reopen on the 15th. Schools reopened on the 25th. The principals and the rest of the school management teams reported on the 25th, and then the teachers reported on the 1st of June. So that's the explanation. I'm sure Mr. Mhlanga can provide more information there. But we do share information on a regular basis with the media, and that culminates to a briefing such as this one. Dropout rate, the estimate was between 10 and 15% last year. But please bear this in mind. We allowed parents who, out of fear and anxiety, that they could keep their children at home. We also have home education in South Africa. Some parents would have opted for home education. We also made provision for online or virtual schooling through the school that the learner would be registered in or by a private provider. So we had made provision for 5 categories of avenues. We will only get a sense of the real accurate figures when learners come back in 2021. We do believe that the 10 to 15%, our dropout rate is usually between 10 and 12% from the study that was conducted by the National Dynamic Study, which indicated that is between 10 and 12%. For last year, we estimated between 10 and 15%. but we'll verify those figures as learners start to arrive from tomorrow. And then about plans to replace teachers, indeed you are right. Your analysis is spot on, Matlaku, that Limpopo and KZN accounts for the highest number of fatalities. You are indeed spot on. Part of what included in the presentation are responses from provinces on how they are going to fill these vacant posts which happen as a result of natural attrition. But the minister also emphasized the fact that what is in the presentation as well is approved school post establishments. Schools have posts where they can appoint. Once you've got an approved school staff establishment approved by the province, sent to a school, it means you can recruit based on the number of posts made available to you. In this presentation also, we asked questions such as, how are you filling vacant posts? As the minister said, we have a number of unplaced Funza Lushaka graduates. And these graduates have been funded by government. So they are available. We also have data of unemployed educators. And such educators could be people who would have, trained or qualified through their own funding. We do have many of those. We take those into account as well. And we also have other entities that teach SA that we are working with. They are helping us to provide, details of educators who are available, who are unemployed, who could be employed. So we're doing that. Storm damaged schools, maybe let me assume that you don't know. Government doesn't insure its properties because it's not cost effective to do so. So there is no an insurance to cover, acts of God, so to speak, or natural phenomenons. Government doesn't do that. It's not cost effective. What usually happens, if there's a natural disaster, an area is declared to be an area that would fall within the scope of natural disaster, like in the Northern Cape, the John Taule Gaitsewe district has been declared an area that qualifies to be a natural disaster area. The provincial and national government then put heads together to provide the requisite intervention to obviate, the difficulties that people who are in such natural disasters would find themselves in. It happened with the Northern Cape. It's been declared. I'm not sure what's going to happen to other areas because in some areas it's inaccessibility of roads, as the minister said. In Mpumalanga you had such schools. In the Northwest you had such schools. And if the provincial administration is able to deal with them, you don't need to declare them disaster areas. 22 schools in the Northwest without water. Next to that number, if you go to the extreme column, it says we are tankering. We have provided water tanks, and there are trucks that are providing water to those schools. Vandalized schools, we have the number here, and as we said, we'll provide the entire presentation to you. We'll put it on the website as well. I think that's all. Mr. Mhlanga, I'm not sure whether there's anything that I left out. Timelines, we've put in timelines also here, and provinces have committed themselves in terms of specific timelines. That's the detail that is in the presentation as well. Thank you.
But on exam policies of learners who don't have IDs, Dr. Paul?
Oh, I'm sure Dr. Pulia can speak to that, but as the minister said, no learner would be disallowed to sit for exams because they don't have an identity document. So ID documents do not preclude learners from sitting for exams or even from attending school. Thank you. Dr. Pulia, you can come if you want.
Thank you so much, Minister and DG. The last time I checked the figures, I think in the previous exam, I think it was 2019, we had about 5,000 candidates who wrote exam without any identity documents. And every year, that number is always around there. So it is surprising that there would be cases like that, because the system is always able to accept those learners that do not have any form of identity. But
we should follow up and see. Really.
Yeah, we will definitely follow up. We'll request for the information to come through so that we can investigate those cases. Thank you so much, Minister. Any more questions on the WhatsApp? Any more questions in the house before we close? Okay. So Zikona. Okay, let's start with the WhatsApp and then we'll end up with this.
Thanks, Mr. Mtang. On the WhatsApp, we have Chando Kubeka from Eyewitness News. And the question is, have all schools in the country met the health and safety protocols to reopen tomorrow? And are those schools that will not, are there schools that will not open tomorrow due to insufficient supply of PPEs? And which provinces have been mostly affected? And the last one is from Mongekile, from Mail and Guardian. And the question is, which I believe this question was answered. The question is, the minister just said that all teacher posts have been filled. And just 2 weeks ago, the portfolio committee said after its oversight to provinces, it had found that there was a serious shortage of teachers in the Eastern Cape, especially in the Joe Kavi and Alfred Nzo districts. In the Alfred Nzo district, the committee said there was more than 1,000 vacancies. Is the minister saying between that oversight visit 2 weeks ago and now those vacancies have been filled? Thanks.
All right, Sakana.
Sakana Chana from News and Africa. First question is on data. Last year, I interviewed several pupils who had challenges with data, because now communication with teachers is happening via WhatsApp. What is the department going to do to address the issue of pupils and accessing data?
All right. Okay. Okay. DG. Okay, Minister. All right. Thank you.
From the reports that we've been receiving in terms of school readiness, the new major challenge really is not about your PPEs now, your mask and your sanitizers. It's actually the recent weather patterns that have damaged some of our infrastructure, but also the schools that have been vandalized. That's a new challenge that we are experiencing. We have quite a big number of schools that have been vandalized during holidays, let alone that we also had a problem with the weather. But from the reports that we got, PPEs are not a challenge. And I think I have to, it helps me to correct myself in terms of teacher posts. The report that we received with DM is saying all schools, all provinces say they've given their schools the allocated posts, which means schools and district are now able and free to appoint. And the point is that we have a large pool of unemployed teachers from college. Some have resigned before time, are retired. They really want to come back to the system. So we have a comfortable pool of teachers that can be appointed now that provinces all of them have declared posts in schools, and schools and districts are free now to appoint, depending on the system, because different provinces use a different appointment. Some appoint at a provincial level, KZN appoints from the province, other appoint in districts. In other instances, schools are appoint on their own. So what is key is just declaring to say school number so and so, we have 15 posts, and depending on the format that the province uses, then they are free to appoint. Data angayizwa zikhona mhlambe there's a plan ayikho ma plan into it of data, but DG maybe on ICTs, but besingakayixoxa. What is it about data? It's not.
No, I ain't there. Okay, is it okay? Health and safety and adequate product essentials. And all of these things are here.
Okay. Okay, colleagues, thank you so much, Minister. Some of the questions that are being asked are in the presentations. We have since all of them. We have since shared the presentations in some of our media WhatsApp groups, but in the next hour they will be available on the website, on our website, and we'll be able to read. It's quite a lot of information to engage in. Tomorrow the Minister will be visiting schools, Prosperitas High School. That's where she will start in the morning for monitoring of day one. Thank you, colleagues, for attending the media briefing. We really appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.
Did you hear WhatsApp?
Which one?
The minister's interview with Kelly.
Yeah, Ahmed is sending. You are sending. That's why there's no coordination. It's confusing.
Teacher provisioning, vacancies, kids. How are the vacancies? All of them. Product essentials, here is it.